of LBJ sometime. But anyway, but we're digressing.
Allow me, I will just keep going. This, we all lived through it. Let me look at the ages of you people. Yes, we all did live through that. And what a time it was. I think we all have really clear memories of how it spread. We've got a good look at the maps occasionally, and then we got a good look at the counts, and we watched the count starting to go up, and then we started to see the way the different nations of the world handled this. And in Ukraine, this was it was not easy because this was a nation that was already poor, already at war, and it had tons of domestic issues. We just finished talking about the issues that they've had for weeks now. So we know that there's a lot going on. And so Zelensky took it very seriously, and he ordered a lockdown and social distancing measures, which good steps, right? Very reasonable. And then he also added in location dependent kind of rules. And it wasn't so much that it was the locality that made the decision. It was really what is the conditions in that locality. Probably things like density of population, the percentage of people who had those kind of things, which allowed some flexibility. And from and who rates these things? But Ukraine got mixed reviews on the response, with some stating that Zelensky relaxed policies too soon. And remember, I mean, this was a tough call to make, wasn't it? There was a lot of arguing about what to do and a lot of pressure to open things up. And the lockdown wasn't received well, especially as quote, small business owners and informal workers, the backbone of the Ukrainian economy. So, excuse me. Uh, this was a chance to attack Zelensky and his administration for how he handled this, and some did, and also some people. And gosh, talk about somebody I knew when I was a kid, saying, "Oh, and she's one of these anti-vax people." And all these other crazy things. And I'm like, I grew up with that person. Anyway, sorry to go off on a private ramble, but it just shows that there are a lot of people out there who didn't believe COVID was real. And as this says, maybe garlic would help prevent the infection, which I'm way more in favor of that than injecting bleach into myself. So I like garlic. Anyways, perhaps. But not as a treatment for COVID, mind you. I better clear that up before I get accused of something. Anyways, the point is that the people who tended to believe in conspiracy theories, and a good number of post-Soviet nations did have a lot of people that had belief in conspiracy theories. And can you blame them after you've learned about Russia for a while? And so the virus was developed in a lab for a lot of people. That's what they believed. And you could, it's like, yeah, well, those kind of things did happen. But what was really clear was that there was no evidence of that at the time, and I don't think since. But go ahead. Somebody wants.
Oh, I just want to say, I think the main point that our authors are bringing out here, though, is the fact that with all of those things that you're mentioning, which were issues, that Zelensky was able to communicate clearly with people. He used his and at inspiring people, and used even the pandemic rule following as an example of what it was to be a good Ukrainian, to be a member of the civic nation, to take responsibility for yourself and for others. So it was a very tough time, as you were saying. Economically, the country had not recovered. the reforms that some reforms were put in place, but they hadn't had time to make much of a difference. So he did have declines in popularity through that period, although they say it was not as bad as some other politicians, some of the presidents, which is really rather amazing. So by the time we got to 2018, um, it he actually his appeal had broadened. They're finding now that his appeal was more evenly across both Russian and Ukrainian speakers. The western regions, Lviv Oblast particularly, were no longer opposed to him. So through this all, he managed to get the country through COVID and to maintain a strong base of popularity, even if it not as hot numbers were not as high as they had been. But as they point out, this every president, I think, go on. Now, okay, back to you, James.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that took me to the bottom of the paragraph. So Zelensky did a lot of messaging about this, about being healthy, and he became more convincing when he repeated them after his wife had contracted COVID, while he himself had to self isolate, and approval. I wish. Well, anyways, this is something where 54% now approved of. Yeah, he did a really good job. It sounds like.
Yeah, and he's a lot more buff than Putin, so God bless him. If he had to, even if the taking the shirt off was by accident, he certainly he made a good showing of himself, so to speak. And over to Dan, and then we're going to finally get to the next chapter. Boy, we talk too much. Over
Hey,
to you, Dan.
Robin, put your eyeballs back in your head.
Nah, later. Hey,
Anyways,
listen,
yeah,
Dad.
James.
Any man who could look hot in 5-inch stilettos and spandex is fine with me. Back to you,
Exactly.
Dan.
But anyways, James, yeah, that's what I had my hand up for. Yeah, I remember in the book, the Russians, yeah, they wanted to give them their vaccine, or they were touting their vaccine to Ukraine. Yeah, at that point, I wouldn't have trusted anything coming from Russia. They can't even do eggs right. But yeah, I can see their wariness. Yeah.
Actually, in the long run, apparently that vaccine turned out to be pretty decently effective. But yeah, I would not want to take a chance on anything Russia's offering me at that point. I mean, this was already after they had invaded, taken over Crimea and everything else. I mean, no thanks. But I think that was one of Putin's last. He was trying to reel Ukraine back in and saw an opportunity, but it didn't work. Lexicon, start working on your mic.
Well, again, I think my voice will spot. Yeah,
Oh,
there it was.
it
See?
was
It did it.
charm. No, the Sputnik vaccine is not good, and it's a big part of Russia's problem with COVID, which is probably still raging through. We'll never know, will we? But no, it did not turn out to be very good, and I don't really believe that it's the only vaccine that Putin used. But they didn't use good protocols, so the development of it did not go through as rigorous work, and didn't get refined far enough to be a good vaccine, and I think there's been a lot of dissatisfaction with it in countries that got sold that bill of goods.
Oh, thank you, Lexicon. That sounds much more likely than the story I'd heard. So I'll take that. Thanks. Curry.
Well, you were talking about vaccines. I'm 6 years old. I have an older half brother who is almost 90, and he received the first vaccine for polio that was available through some of the advocacy of like Denny Thomas and others in the area, and he also got the later one too. And I want to give credit to the people in that which was at that time the Soviet Union, that I don't remember. I do not remember the person's name, but he was a very well established scientist in the Soviet Empire, and somehow they got the vaccine, and he gave it to his own children, and for polio, and I'm not sure where I'm exactly going with this, but the fact of the matter is, when COVID came about, this was very, very inspiring in its, because we have so much controversy in the States about, are you going to vax your kids? Are you not, for whatever reason? And so much misinformation has come about. Again, I'm not sure where I'm exactly going with this, but the fact of the matter is that there are those who have a good common sense. They trust science, and they just even in the Soviet times, one of the top scientists said, "Yes, this is a good vaccine," and for polio. And now we have faced with COVID, and we've had various vaccines that have come about. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I was in 19. When I was really quite young. I'm now 67, so I got the vaccines that were available. There was not even a question, because I grew up with parents who were a little bit older when I was born, and they grew up were young adults when you had, if you were not vaccinated, you were quarantined in Minnesota. This is, and yes, you could, people would bring you food, they would bring you, supplies, but until the county nurse would come by and declare you safe, you couldn't go to the grocery store. So, and I'm just relating a little bit of history, and because this controversy about vaccines and such. I can talk to you and finish your German. It's really stupid and narrisch, as they would say in German.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Curry. I think we
Yeah.
don't want to get too far
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole
No,
of vaccines
exactly.
at this point,
I
because we're
appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is, we are making some real strides to help people in Ukraine. Not to get on another subject, not to get into the rabbit hole. We have the ability to make a real difference in Ukraine, and I've chatted on this platform a little bit, and I want to thank you that you have given me a little bit of a time for my voice, and this is our what 1940 moment for Americans. We have to decide, and it's well. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. We are at a Wendepunkt, as we would say in German, a real turning point, and
think
we
we
have some
are.
serious decisions to make here in America, and go talk to your Congress people. They're not bad people necessarily, but the fact of the matter is, they don't have enough people coming to the offices. I live in northern Minnesota, and my office is pretty accessible, and you just go there with your agenda, well, not agenda, but your voice, your concerns, and they have to listen to you. And frankly, I had some really good, reasonable conversations with my local office. I talked with my own congressperson's representative or staff member. We had a great conversation. You can make a difference, is what I'm saying. We don't
Curry,
hear enough.
thank you so
thank you very
much.
much.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah,
stop here right now.
Curry, you know what else I took from your comments about COVID is that we really were hurt by this idea that there's no truth, that you can have your own facts, that a few minutes internet research on the wrong sites tells you all you need to know. These things really hurt us, and the bad
Absolutely, my
leaders
friend.
sure did hurt us, Curry, as well. So
yeah,
it's good.
true.
It's good to remember these things. So Curry, we're going to get back to the book now. Appreciate your
Right.
Yeah,
time.
it's
Thank you very much.
it's
Thank you for giving
well,
we
after we
it's
talk to Will and
yeah.
Forever Child.
But
Well,
just, I beg
go
you
ahead.
both, let's try to do this quickly because it's 9:10 and we have yet to start on the chapter that we were supposed to be discussing tonight.
I'm
So
sorry. I
let's-
apologize. You jumped in between us. So thank you very much
No, that's
for
all
giving
right,
giving
Curry.
me
No,
voice.
we all have been all of us can talk each other under the table. We've been doing that tonight, but I would like to get back on track at some point. Okay, James, over to you.
Yep. God
Thanks.
bless you all. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thanks, Curry.
for giving me a voice tonight. Bye bye. Cheers.
Okay. All right. We'll see you later. Take care. Thanks. Anyway, let's see who was first. Was it Will? Was it you, For Every Child?
Yeah, all I want to say about the vaccine issue is, yes, Russia's vaccine did end up being effective at the early variants, less so later on. But the key is it was completely untested. They went right into production with that'll be good enough. It essentially shows the crassness that Russia will show to its own population, and then they wanted to try to pass that off to Ukraine to go see we're your big brother again in relation to this. Whereas, there have been good aspects to management of COVID and bad ones around the world. But the key is the ones that focused on science were were more effective. Basically, Australia, we used lockdowns quite effectively because we're a very big isolated country, and we have a population that was more conducive to taking on that we're in this thing all together, and disinformation didn't work as well. Whereas in America, in Australia, there were the CDC on March 13th, Friday, March 13th. I remember talking to a good friend of mine in America who I can no longer speak to over issues like this. And there were 13 things that the CDC on March 13th, 2020 said we're going to do this. We're going to do these things. And then everybody got started. Australia did like 11 of those 13 things and then opened up. America did like one of those things and then descended into freedom. And, you get what you get. You get what you get from that situation. But the particular thing about this situation in relation to Russia and disinformation is look at the manner in which COVID affected societies where disinformation was let to run rampant versus those where the government stepped in and said, we're not going to allow this. And I think that oftentimes is the big difference.
Thank you, Will. And about Russia's vaccine, I would just say I don't test often, but when I do it in production. Anyways, no, that's a joke. Anyway, For Every Child.
I can make this really quick. There was no question at all about the polio vaccine. Even when we were polio, my and my two brothers were polio pioneers with the sugar cube. But there was absolutely no question in my parents' mind about that. My mother's family was the very first one to come down with smallpox in Denton County. And the family was quarantined. My grandfather was gone at the time, fortunately, so he could continue working, and he would bring groceries to the gate. He couldn't even come inside the gate. He would just come to the gate and leave groceries for his wife, my grandmother, to pick up. But she was pregnant at the time, and that child was lost. So there was never a doubt. There was no smallpox vaccine at that time, and they were well aware uh, of what it had been like for them.
Thanks for every child. Well,
Okay, thank
so
you.
that was
Okay.
our what do they call those, excursus on COVID or something like that?
Yes,
We
exactly.
just concluded
Yeah.
the pre-war chapter. So this was the pre-war presidency chapter, and now we're going to turn to the Zelensky effect at war chapter, and I'm going to let you lead out, Robin.
Yes, I think we're going to try to bomb through a little bit of this.
Some of it, at least.
Yes. No, we will stop at appropriate spots. But I mean, we always have next week. Actually, the last chapter of the book is interesting, but it's short. So if we don't get this completely finished, we can keep on going next week. Okay, the Zelensky effect at war starts on page 227. And it opens with a scene from Servant of the People where Ukraine and this was the season that ran during the election. Ukraine has been divided into a bunch of small states after there was a downward spiral back into the old style of Soviet politics and economic chaos. And they needed someone to bring the country back together. And guess who that was? It was our friend Holoborodko, who is Zelensky in the Servant of the People, and he brought them back together by an appeal to what was a central part of his campaign and his presidency, was an appeal to the civic identity that unites all Ukrainians. In the sitcom, they point out that he emphasized the importance of what unites Ukrainians, and he didn't need a Russian enemy to point that out. That it was very strong, concept even without that. They less than 3 years later, when Ukraine's survival was on the line, and Zelensky's first job was to ensure that the 44 million Ukrainians wouldn't split apart in the face of the attack. Zelensky was extraordinarily well positioned to accomplish this, and it was precisely because of who he was, and that there had been questions about whether he was, a Slovak, whether he was, a Russian speaker from the East, whether he wouldn't be a strong Ukrainian leader because of that. And it turns out that he was actually very well positioned to be exactly the leader that Ukraine needed at that point, because he was typical of the so-called ordinary Ukrainian that Putin expected to greet his invading troops with flowers. Um, he was emblematic of the mistake that Putin had made in assuming that people would greet them, and he also because he was so well known before being president. People widely felt that he shared their outlook and understood the lives of ordinary people, so he was able to inspire and keep the morale higher than someone like Poroshenko might have, who was the chocolate oligarch. He was not a man of the people, and he did not have that organic connection Zelensky had. So that was a very important thing in the beginning of the war, and rallying everyone to the cause. And I think it made a big difference. Also, one of the important things they point out, which I think many of us noted, was that Zelensky knew when to keep his nose out of things. He knew he wasn't a military man. He picked people who were good, and he gave them his full faith, and said, go and do what you do. He was the cheerleader. He was the person who was out speaking to international audiences and getting getting support, but he didn't stick his nose into what the military was doing. He trusted them to do the job, something that Putin does not do, and it's part of, I think, what has made the difference. In Putin has hamstrung his own military, such as it is, quite a few times by insisting on things that he wanted. Zelensky did not do that, certainly at the beginning of the war, and that made a huge difference. Now, the Zelensky effect at war's eve, page 230. As I mentioned, his popularity ratings had declined somewhat, but not as much as, not as badly as previous Ukrainian presidents. And he had COVID and the economic situation to deal with. Our authors posit that Russia and Putin could very well have looked at the situation in Ukraine and saw that people were dissatisfied and unhappy with how things were going, and assumed that those people who were unhappy would become collaborators who would welcome the Russians in, not really understanding that in a free country, which Russia is not, that people can disagree vociferously with their leaders without ever wavering in their commitment to the country. During the same period as all of these difficult things were going on, there was a rise in shown in the polls of attachment to things Ukrainian. 90% of the country at this point identified as Ukrainian rather than any of the minority groups. There was an increased personal sense of civic duty, voting, engagement in civil society, and protesting about problems. And in part because of Zelensky's leadership and servant of the People Party, there was a rise in support for democracy, the EU, and NATO, all of which would not have made Putin very happy. So really, it should not have been a surprise that Ukrainians fought back so fiercely when all of these things were threatened. Now over to you, James, for a minute.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I thought that it was real hubris to take that away with, to think that Ukraine was going to be a pushover, hubris right there, and then to think that the signs that he was looking at couldn't be interpreted in any other way is just foolishness. But I guess if you put out a COVID vaccine without testing it, then maybe that is exactly what it was. It's just pure foolishness on his part. So I wouldn't put it past the man to just have failed to do the very basic kind of things that you should do. So anyways, pardon me. Anyway, let's see. So this is over to the Russians' misguided march to war. And this is more foolishness, right? Let me make sure I'm looking at the right page here. Sorry, you guys. There we are. All right. So first, there was the dress rehearsal in 21, where Russia piled up troops on the border, and it was just a way to show off, right? Sure, it was. And they were just doing a little outing, and but they left some troops there, and that was the beginning of it. Really, was leaving in place some of the troops and equipment that did take part in the war. So it was the beginning of the buildup. But anyways, wow. This takes us right into the July 12th screed from Putin on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. And it is an amazing piece of junk. And Timothy Snyder said about it, what was it? It was, a failed history, a failure of history. Or, oh, wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong. Oh, boy. But I think that was approximately it. And I have.
Yeah, that was close.
Yeah. And I think that the part that really struck me was, so I wanted to go look at this document. And the only place I could find it where it was, I didn't have to sign up for a book club or anything like that or buy it. I found the wiki page because, Wikipedia, right? They got everything there. So they did have a section on that. And then there was a longer quote in Wikipedia from, pardon me, from Plohe. And that I now have destroyed somehow the link I had to that page. So if you give me a second, I'll go look it up, but it is not from the book, but I thought it fit so well, Robin. So if you could pick up there, I'll go get this, find this Wikipedia page.
Yep. Sounds good. Okay. Yeah, this as James was saying, the so-called dress rehearsal for the invasion 2021. This is the point where Ukraine actually began preparations for an all-out war. They did it without a lot of fanfare because they did not want to either clue in Putin that they were taking it seriously and have him look at preparations, or to spook the rest of the country. But the military started really working on it at this point. I remember reading a story about Zaluzhny running some war games and having them fail miserably, and him reading the riot act to some of his his underlings, is the next level down. But this is part of what saved Kiev, because they had done this and they had made changes based on the fact that it had been a dismal failure the first time. So it was not a dismal failure when it counted. Okay, this screed from Putin, I mean, is really a vile thing. And one of the, on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, I find it interesting he's even willing to use the word Ukrainian, but it's a bunch of BS. Snyder and practically every actual historian makes the point that Putin does nothing about history. He's read some of Dugin and some of these, some other, ideologues who are really short in the history fact department, and has built a tower of lies on it. Basically, they're saying Ukrainians are nothing other than wayward Russians deceived by the wicked West for centuries. And he focuses mostly on language, historical lands, and orthodoxy. Language just cracks me up because Russians don't understand Ukrainian, so how they can think it's the same language is beyond me. Historical lands, Muscovy is up way far from where Ukraine is, and orthodoxy. There during the Soviet Union, which was basically run by Russia, they persecuted everyone except the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was severely persecuted. So I mean, all of this was nonsense. But somehow Putin thought that this was going to resonate with Ukrainians, but it did the very opposite. There was a massive backlash to it. And at that point, Medvedev, Drunken Dima, as I like to call him, he started going on. It always pops his head up, the anti-Semitism, that Zelensky is basically a race traitor because he's siding with the Ukrainian nationalists, i.e. the Nazis, right? Just like German Jews collaborated with the Nazis, which, is just, first of all, there's very little evidence that German Jews collaborated with the Nazis on any scale at all. I looked this up because it didn't sound true to me, first of all. And second of all, Ukrainian nationalists, there is an extreme right wing in Ukraine. It's much smaller than the analogs in Western Europe. So I mean, the whole thing was just nonsense. But they come up with what they need to make their point. All through this time, there are increasing warnings of invasion plans from the West, from NATO countries, the U.S. The government tried to downplay these in public because of concern for the fragile economy and to prevent mass panic and flight for as long as possible. But few in the leadership, and this has come out more now that we have reporting coming out of people who were actually around Zelensky before and after the invasion. They knew it was serious, but they didn't want to have mass panic on their hands on top of everything else. And there was still a question right up until the morning of February 24th. There was a question of whether there was anything that could be done by other countries to shift the Kremlin's plans. Anything that would not involve sacrificing territorial integrity and sovereignty. But unfortunately, as we saw, there was nothing that could be done. And on February 24th, they invaded. James, did you find that?
Yes, I did. So Plohe's quote is, of course, Lenin did not create Ukraine. In 1918, he started a war against an independent Ukrainian state and then replaced it with a puppet state called the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. What Lenin really created was the Russian Federation, a state that received its constitution in 1918 and became part of the USSR 4 years later. In 1991, Yeltsin removed this entity created by Lenin from the USSR, thereby contributing to the collapse of the Union. Lenin was the creator of modern Russia, not Ukraine, and should be considered as such. Now, that is a very um, scholarly description of the history of events, and I think that it's really good to hear a voice that we already know from book club, to hear about this kind of document. And it's really clearly was something that Putin was proud of. And you could see that. Was it not published in the West, Robin? I believe it was.
Yeah, I think it certainly got a lot of press. I think it must have been, yeah.
Think it was, and you can still get it on the Kremlin for free, but I don't suggest you go to the Kremlin website. Just like the Isbor's Club, I don't suggest you go there either. But yeah, they've got stuff up there if you want to go get it. But it's probably they probably have it in English and Russian. But in any case, so I didn't have any more on that. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
on to the next section then, or?
Yeah, I think so. We're on to Putin's Orwellian announcement. I didn't put a page reference there, but it's somewhere before page 241. Okay, shall I start and then you jump in when you have something to add, James?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That work?
Oh, I was doing that thing. The one where you start talking without hitting a button.
Oh, well, it's one of my favorite tricks.
Yeah, it's mine too, apparently. So, anyways, yeah, this starts on page 237, and the Orwellian announcement. Orwell, if you didn't know, wrote 1984, a really dark book about authoritarian states and how they will force you to think the way that they want you to think and give up reality. I think is one of the central parts of that. So I just don't want to assume everybody read that, because some of us took a long time to get to it. For me, it was not a high school book, surprisingly enough for me. So that's why I wanted to put that in there. The Russian Security Council met. This is political theater then, if they're filming it, and they did. And they wanted to let the world know why they were going to do what they were going to do, which was to invade Ukraine. And so of course, they wanted to protect those poor people in the Donetsk and Luhansk um, areas who are sadly under attack, right, by Ukraine. That was the story, anyways. And they also talked a lot about NATO and Western aggression. And it's like, well, okay, again, where are the NATO missiles landing in Russia? They're not. Okay, so what kind of crazy bullshit is this again? But it really, it works for his audience, and this was mainly for the home audience, and I suspect for some of the other nations of the world that are a little bit more willing to go along with this kind of bullshit. So, anyways, it was clear that they were talking about all of Ukraine because they didn't focus on just the areas they'd already kind of considered theirs, and they were talking about demilitarizing and denazifying. We've heard that enough now, but that was part of this original announcement, and it was really focused on Russia and not as much not as much about Ukraine, and that's fitting because that was what they were trying to convey, was that really it's all just Russia. We're going to help it out, help it understand itself. It just doesn't understand its. In fact, Ukraine doesn't exist, and the Ukrainian language is bad, so it's banned. Crazy stuff again. So, anyways, the uh, let me think. Yeah, okay. So it was a two-part speech, and so they gave the speech. They recorded it, video recorded it all at once, and they presented the first half, and then they used the second half to actually announce the special military operation, and that way there was no cues that were given as to what was going on, or you know, any way give away the timing of what they, or at least the preferred timing that they had in mind for this. So that happened, and then, this whole thing was, of course, something that really was a restoration, or kind of a legitimate, uh, you know, or re-legitimizing Yanukovych, possibly. We don't really know. It never got that far, but that would have been sort of the natural order of things for Russia to do, because they would say, well, yeah, this guy worked before for us. He can do it again. And that makes sense to us. So it makes sense. So they did that. Anyways, of course, it didn't go according to plan for Russia. And they really did expect that the um, Ukrainian people would rise up and free themselves from the oppressive Zelensky. And just because they hated, how things were going in their country, again, Robin, this is that same point. They thought they misinterpreted the signs. They really did. And so they read them wrong. And so, um, first, the most important thing that happened, in that outset, as we all remember, was saving Ukraine. And it really saved the nation, that they could save Kyiv. It was such a powerful battle, and so much equipment was destroyed, um, that it really set the tone for the rest of the war, and it really, really impressed all of Ukraine's future allies at that point. You couldn't look at that, and it would have to dispel any doubts you had about Zelensky possibly being a Russian agent, because he did spend 6 years in Moscow, after all, spoke Russian, and grew up in a closed city, and his dad was a general. So you got to wonder, right? So all of that was dispelled pretty much in that first month. So, but furious, go ahead. And I could talk until you talk, but I'll just be quiet this time.
James, his father wasn't a general. He was a professor or something or other.
I-
Maybe it was something.
I think
His grandparents.
Zelensky's father, I thought was. You're right. You're right. No, grandfather. Sorry. Yes.
That's what it is. Okay.
Zelensky, in his dopey lecture to Tucker Carlson, I think, said that Zelensky's father fought for the Nazis during the war.
Yeah, that's right.
Putin, in his dopey lecture, yeah. But of course, that was dead wrong. Zelensky's father was born after the war ended. But
And his grandfather fought in the Red Army.
that's right. And his grandfather was the only one of 4 sons to survive the Holocaust. Yeah, well, I just came across something today while doing, as I was saying, these deep investigations of mine into certain currents. But I'm thinking about this time we were all sitting there watching this buildup of troops, watching the warnings by American and British intelligence and stuff, and waiting for this axe to fall, then watching that ridiculous Orwellian meeting, including the guy that gets called out. It's the head of intelligence, actually. It's gets called out for stumbling over his lines and so on. I mean, it's just appalling. But just a little bit, just slightly earlier, 4 months before this invasion, during one of these Valdai conferences, so-called think tank that Putin likes to have, somebody I was reading quotes an interesting, he gives another one of these rambling speeches on so-called history, but somebody pops up after this and talks to him about, this is a Ukrainian so-called pundit, well, talks about how Ukraine is sliding towards NATO and turning it into a dangerous anti-Russia. They love to worry about that, and asks Putin what he's thinking and doing about this. And oh yeah, saying, as we said earlier, some leaders of Ukraine's anti-Western opposition, like Viktor Medvedchuk, are being persecuted and so on. Anyway, this is a line from Putin. This is interesting to hear. This is October of 21. He says, well, the leaders of the country came to power relying on the voters of the southeastern regions. Now, Zelensky is from the southeast, right? And so he's talking about these areas he's trying to take over now, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and so on. He says they came to power relying on those voters, and then almost immediately they changed their political positions into directly the opposite. This is Putin speaking. Why? It happened because the silent majority voted for them in the hope that their electoral promises would be kept. He's probably meaning making peace with Russia, not his fault, of course. But the voiceful, aggressive nationalist minority suppressed any freedom to make the decisions expected by Ukraine's population, and essentially they, this nationalist minority, have come to rule over the country. And here is the clincher. This is a deadlock. I don't even understand how to break it. Vladimir Putin, unquote. So I thought that was a real gem. I mean, that so in where he's at home in his little Valdai think tank, where he's comfortable, he thinks he's going to, in answer to this Ukrainian, explain that he doesn't even know how to, I guess, respond to his obligation to somehow, I mean, what is that supposed to mean? At any rate, even Putin is perplexed. So it's part of the whole. July had been his essay, and here's this statement that was not so much picked up on, but it sure is interesting now. So yeah, I mean, there's any amount of discussion about why Putin took such, what we can see now is an absolutely foolhardy decision to invade this country, and how much was poor information, how much was hubris, and so on. But I just thought it was a true gem.
It was good. It was very good. And it just reminds me that, the Pope, this is what it reminded me of. The Pope at some point here, contemporaneously said something like, they were manipulated by NATO, and Russia was manipulated by NATO, which again, not so crazy stuff. They didn't need any help from NATO to do what they wanted to do. In fact, if NATO had their way, this would not have happened. So it's just an idiotic statement, but there was a lot of that going around.
Indeed, it's and as Lexicon was saying, the hubris involved. If in 3 days into the war, Putin must have realized he'd made a massive mistake, but there's still no backing down. It's 2 years later, and the destruction is continuing. It's really the damage that one person with a horrible ideology can make, and I mean a lot of people around him helping him out, but it's really it's horrifying. Let's go on to the next section. A quick one: Zelensky's initial response. This is just referring to what we all saw, that when the invasion happened, there was a broad majority of the adult population organized, volunteered, lined up to enlist, made Molotov cocktails to chuck out the windows. Not at all what Putin was expecting. And Zelensky was a powerful role model for ordinary citizens, demonstrating by example how to react, physically standing his ground, demonstrating contagious confidence in the military. I mean, the fact that he wouldn't even he wouldn't go into hiding. He was there on Bankova Street the whole time, basically saying, I'm not going anywhere. They're not going to intimidate me. I mean, it's the amount of personal courage is pretty amazing. But he didn't call attention to himself with that. He always referred back to his faith in the military, his faith in his people. So it was, it wasn't focused on his personal bravery. It was focused on him as the leader of the people. And we all remember that famous quote, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride," which it has not been established he ever said it, but it was such an embodiment of exactly of the message he was conveying that it became a meme that was shared by the Ukrainian government. And we all know it now. There are T-shirts and everything. But the bottom line was the message: he was safe, secure, and in charge, and Ukraine was not going to capitulate. So that was the beginning of the war, and that set the stage for Ukraine's continuing resistance. The next section is Commander in Chief. And this, as I mentioned before, they say sometimes what leaders don't do is as important as what they do. And the fact that Zelensky left the military professionals free to make the key decisions. Russian military strategy was seriously flawed in the face of all this. They sent many too few soldiers in to accomplish what they wanted. Also, they weren't able to land at Hostomel because of the unexpected and determined resistance of I think it was just a National Guard force that was there to begin with. I mean, they just didn't, they didn't make it. They made it possible to keep the Russians from landing their troop transport planes there. And that was another big thing that saved Kyiv, along with the destruction of the bridges into the city that were coordinated by Syrsky. Who's now the head of the military recently, and so the Putin's perception had been of a weakness in Ukrainian attachment to the state, which he saw to some extent in 2014, not because there was such weakness, but because Ukraine was in such a vulnerable position at that point. But as we all saw, that this had changed dramatically in the last 7-8 years. The military was better prepared. Civic national identity had greatly strengthened, with every Ukrainian pitching in, enlisting, volunteering. I mean, and one of the things that we all got a big kick out in the beginning was those farmers going and stealing Russian tanks every time the Russians turned their back, hundreds of them. So our authors make the point that civic identity did not only produce Zelensky, it produced 44 million Zelenskys. He was a representative of his people, but every Ukrainian who got involved in the resistance and helping the state was helping the country to resist was in his own way a Zelensky in that model. Over to you, Marcus.
I just want to say the Hostomel airport was epic. It was, well, there will be some cool action movie about it in the future, I'm sure. Mamuka, the commander of the Georgian Legion, ran out of ammo and ended up using his BMW as a weapon, or maybe it was a Mercedes. Anyways, he used his car to run over Russian soldiers. So it was very epic. I can't wait to see that part of the action movie, because he actually ended up having to do that, which is pretty epic.
I'd forgotten about that. And I remember too seeing a picture of some guy. He had a some kind of it was a German one of the German cars, BMW, Audi or something, a convertible 2-door sports car, and he'd mounted a machine gun on the back of it. So that's who Russia was fighting against. Anybody, this is a country of people, 90-year-old ladies chucking Molotov cocktails out of windows, guys, mounting machine guns on the back of their sports cars. She should pack up and go home. There's no way they're going to win. Unfortunately, they're going to kill a lot of people in the process. But anyway, back to you, Marcus.
Well, speaking of which, Ukrainian babas have been soldering drones for first-person view drones, right? They're getting certified in online classes and making drones their damn self, okay? You're not going to win your occupation when the grandmas are creating the weapons, okay? It's done. Like, back off, Russia. It's not going to happen. These old ladies saw the Nazis leave. They saw the Soviet Union crumble. They're not going to fall to Putin's thugs.
Well
Yeah,
said.
100%. Yeah, I have a friend whose father's retired, and he's in that Druk army. Druk means print. He has a 3D printer. He prints up little parts that go on some of the drones. That's what he does in his spare time. Yeah, the whole country is mobilized. Yeah, you can't win against them. It's. I mean, thank God. I mean, we have to give them what they need so they can win with the the least loss of life. But yeah, I mean the heart and the determination of the Ukrainian people is something to admire. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, just these first couple days that Zelensky didn't leave. I just want to hark back a little bit to another thing that happened a little bit earlier, February 14th. At this point, um, the U.S. knew what was happening. Biden was speaking almost daily about warnings, and so there was questions after one of his things this day that he was asked, like, is Zelensky going to run from Ukraine? And just, Joe's like, I don't know, basically. And then they ask him again about it, and he says, really, that decision is up to him. It may be wisdom for him to leave, but that really is up to him. And they kept kind of a couple more questions about that. And it just is an example of how the situation, it went from um, bad to worse. But what didn't happen was there was not this humongous, what do we want to call it, evacuation of personnel or people abandoning ship. That is not what happened. They all reported for duty. So that was that 44 million army of Zelensky's that they had, which, that's what was needed to get Ukraine started in this war on the right foot, and they got off on the right foot, and it was really powerful, as we've seen. So, anyways, that was what I wanted to say. But I see Robin has disappeared. So I'm going to take the opportunity to say something now that I was going to say for the very end, and that is, due to some caring issues here at home, I have to do some more family duties than I used to have to do. And as much as I have liked doing this, it has taken up more time than I thought it was going to take. And this is my last book of book club. So here is my plea, and that is, please, if you can, join Robin if you're, a co-host, or if you are a listener and willing to become a speaker, then please join her. It would be good to, have another voice up there, somebody else who's read it, because we all need backup when we do this kind of work. It takes a lot of knowledge, and it really, yeah, but it would help very much. So I am at the end of this book stepping down. So kind of sad, but we reviewed On Tyranny. We reviewed Plohi's Russo-Ukrainian War, The End of History. We reviewed The Road to Freedom by Timothy Snyder, and now we're working on this very fantastic book. So I just wanted to let people know that, and I'm not going anywhere. I hope it means I'll have a little bit more time to co-host, but we'll see. And then the other thing is frankly, we've got an important election coming up. I know you know that, and so I think that is going to be calling out to me to do more things than I did last time. Because last time, well, yeah, things went okay, but the time before that is really what I meant. The time before the last big presidential election didn't go I wanted, and I want to make sure that we do the right thing this time and get fully behind that. So it's going to distract a little bit uh, from from this activity. So I think for my mental health, I just need to be realistic about how much I can do. And also, I'm also very interested in the understanding genocide, and I haven't been able to keep up with the reading uh, of the cases that I would like to do. So there are many, you know how it is. You want to do everything, you can't. You can't do everything. So, anyways, that's what I wanted to say. So, Robin, I told Robin already. So, anyways, that's what I had to say.
Yeah, thanks. I caught the tail end of what you said here too, and I just wanted to thank you, James. We've gone through a lot of books together. It's a tremendous amount of work. I do appreciate how much effort you've put into this. It's been months, and I respect your choice because we all have to. I mean, I've cut things out in my life that were just too much for me, and you have to know what's important and what you are going to feel you need to do. Um, James will be happy to know, amazed to know that he and I are probably going to be voting an identical ticket next presidential election, and it's not because I love Biden so much, but you do what you got to do, and so God bless you, and I hope you still be able to drop into the book club sometimes, maybe without all of the pressure to prepare everything. You'll be able to join us and just enjoy the conversation sometimes. I'm
It's
very, very
it's not
grateful.
the 2 hours, right? It's not the 2 hours. It's the prep time. It really is.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was easier in college. I think maybe COVID got a hold of my brain or something. I don't know what, but it just doesn't come as easy as it used to do the prepping of the notes and all that.
Well, it does take a lot of time, and I mean, yeah, I guess, as I mentioned to you before, having gone through law school and been incredibly under the gun to outline massive amounts of reading, and that is something I learned to do. I've had a lot of practice with it, so I think that makes it a little bit easier for me. But yeah, it is a lot of work, and I know you'll still be around, and that I'm grateful for. So thank you. And anyway, let's go to Marcus, and then we will continue on.
Well, I just wanted to say that I, James, you appear to really love this, so I think you'll love it more when there isn't stress or pressure. So just go and enjoy yourself. You've done your duty, man. You shouldn't feel bad. You've done your duty.
Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate that. Yep. Yeah. And I just say this too about unit cohesion. It doesn't mean that everybody's in it forever. It means that the group, the unit keeps functioning. It keeps doing its assigned duties. And MriyaReport is a unit. We keep on going. We have turnover. Frankly, it can be a stressful place to be because you know what? We're involved in a war. Involved in a war. That's a lot. That's a lot to take on. It brings up hard feelings potentially. It brings up suspicion. Well, we've seen how bad things can be even just in Twitter. So without saying anything about what we've seen, we know shit happens. So yeah, so it can be tough, and I admire everybody who has served here, even if they're gone, and I understand how that can happen. But I'm not going anywhere, so I will be around. I'll be co-hosting, and enjoying this. You're like you said, Marcus, probably a little bit more. Thanks.
Sorry, trying to type and co-host at the same time doesn't work too well. I think we're getting close to our turnover point, but I don't think our new co-hosts are ready quite yet. So why don't we just go on to the next section or so? I think when I was last talking to you before we have this thing called rubber banding. I don't know if it happens to the listeners, but it happens to co-hosts sometimes where all of a sudden the audio just goes completely freaky, like aliens have taken over the space. So I had to go and recycle so I could understand anybody again. Um, the next section would go. Oh, Dan, go over to you first.
James, I just wanted to say thank you for your contribution to the book club. You got me interested in it too. Yeah, and it was nice to meet you down in Washington. So thank you so much. You get my brain working.
It was fantastic to meet you and to have dinner together and with Christopher as well. And so it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, that was cool. We'll have to do it again. I hope we have never have to go to Washington again, but we might.
If nothing else to celebrate when Ukraine has already won, we can get together. Well, then that'll be on the beach in Crimea. Right. I must say, Dan, when I saw that you were there and James was there, and I was so jealous. I mean, I couldn't get away. I have complications having animals that need to be taken care of. But oh my goodness, they had dinner with Dan. I was really upset. I was more upset that I missed you than everybody else. I have to tell you.
What am I, chopped liver?
Yeah, I feel like, it's funny, James. I feel like I sort of know you because we've worked together so much. Yeah, I would like to meet you in person too. It's true. I almost feel like, I don't know, the people we co-host with each other, I almost feel like I know you guys all in person already, which we don't. It's very odd. It's a funny relationship you get with people a long distance like this. I mean, like Will Teal over there,
One thing is we have a shared unconscious, if you know what I mean, the back channel. So, which sort of binds us too. So in ways that, sorry, listeners, you can't. You got to join MriyaReport, volunteer, sign the NDA, and then you can learn about those things. But I bet Will Teal has something brilliant to say.
Wow, no pressure. No pressure, though. Well, so if I've been listening in the background here while doing some home chores. If this is your last show of like presenting in
last
book
book,
club, last book you're presenting in book club.
one more week,
right?
Depending on our speed.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I've really appreciated going through the principles in each of these chapters with you, James, in all these books, and exploring the issues in more detail. I've never participated in a book club before because, well, I probably just don't have the patience. But this is has been a great for me to sit in and listen to the long form perspective on some of these chapters. At the end of the day, though, you want to sum up these books almost in a short form on their title. And this, the Zelensky effect to me, well, maybe we'll get this into the last show to talk with you about it. But the Zelensky effect to me seems to be the common man, if you will. And I don't mean common in the way that like everybody grows up to be a comic, and have that sort of publicity and celebrity. What I mean is a person thrown into a completely uncertain role and out of their depth and everything like that, which essentially we have all experienced. That's the common man perspective that Zelensky brings to this thing, but he has adapted himself so well and shown the basic intelligence of a guy. It just shines through. And that's the Zelensky effect, and that's why it's no accident that he's a comic, because you don't get to be a smart ass until you're smart first, right? The observations that he makes on how the world works, how he puts together a team around him, all that sort of stuff. So Zelensky's kind of what you would aspire to be as the common man, a guy who's smart enough to know what he knows and smart enough to know what he doesn't know and put a good team around him, being smart enough to understand that you should pick out people around you who are going to be better than you at certain things, and heeding their advice, and developing true wisdom about situations that comes down to just also sometimes being a good guesser, and he has guessed correctly, and the the other Zelensky effect of him in total is as the common person staying in Kiev. I am listening to the reports of and speeches or clips of him on the news at the time contemporaneously. I'm, it might be mythos already, but I'm pretty sure he said that I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. But more importantly, by his very actions, staying when it was no certainty at all that he was going to survive, putting himself at serious personal risk. He brought what we would hope is the common man's approach to participating in saving his nation at a time when its very existence was uncertain, I guess. And yeah, so that's what I take away from this book as the Zelensky effect, because it's the right guy in the right place at the right time. And unfortunately, I hope that's not an accident in the world, is I guess what my takeaway.
I suspect that there were probably 20, 25, 30, 50, something like that, people who could have done what he did. So it had to be somebody who had the wonderful talent at communication that he had. And also the fact that, well, first, he was driven off his first desired occupation, but he got into law and he got a law degree. So, talk about a way to rule by law is what he was after. So he was well suited to that. And he was also well suited by his history in Russia, where he just, he was in it. He could make fun of it because of the cartel and all that. He was well positioned to combat Russia because he knew it so intimately. So in so many regards, he's just the perfect guy for the job. But that is not to say he's irreplaceable, because the point of the book really is that it isn't about this one guy. It's about the whole nation, and 44 million Zelenskys is probably a bit more than that movie about the multiple Michael Keaton's character. I forget the name. Anyways, Robin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that is exactly it. I mean, there are a few people you see in life, and you say that person was born to do this. But with Zelensky, when we learn about his upbringing, the things that he did in his life, his abilities, his education, it all, in retrospect, looks like it was all carefully channeled and honed for him to be exactly where he needed to be when he was there. And thank God he was. And as they say, he is a leader, he is an emblem, but he's one of 44 million Zelenskys. And with that, I am going to drop down because my son has been trying to call me and I haven't talked to him in a week, which is terrible. Slavi is here to come up, and Nefo Dave will be here in a few minutes. So thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Next week, we will finish this chapter, and then we'll go on to the last chapter, and we very possibly will finish the book next week. Up in the nest, I posted the title of the and cover of the next book we'll be doing, Ukraine, Forging of a Nation by Yaroslav Fritsak. So it's a great book. If you haven't read it already, some of us have. Yeah, I think you really enjoy it. I got a lot out of it, really enjoyed it. Wonderful book. Anyway, thanks very much. Thank you, James. And thank you again for all of the time and effort you put into the book club. And I'll see you next week, God willing. Slava Ukraini.
Hello, Slava.
Slava.
Thank you, Robin. You are the leader still, and I always have been. So I appreciate what you put into it. And yep. So things will go on, and I will read that book. I will just not be pressured to read it. So, but Slavi is here. Slavi, welcome. Hello. Good to see you.
Hello, hello. How's everyone doing on this fine Sunday, I guess, evening?
Peachy keen. That means
Fantastic.
Amazing. That was something I've never heard before, Peachy Keen. I'll definitely will be using that. I like it. It's cute. Uh, well, I'm just gonna wait for my co-host, but in the meantime, I wanted to we're at top of the hour and wanted to honor the recent deaths that happened in Ukraine. And it was due to a Russian drone that struck a high-rise building, resulting in killing 12 people. This was in Odessa. So, and there's a lot more that are injured. Among the victims, there were 5 children. We have little Timofey, aged 4, Lisa, aged 7 months, Mark, aged 3 years, Zlata, aged 8 years old, and Sergey, who would have turned 10 in July. So this was a very devastating impact that has left, of course, many families grieving the loss of loved ones, and they're grappling and dealing with now homelessness as well as they lost their homes. So this is due to Russia's relentless terror against ordinary Ukrainians. It persists every day, almost. The drones that caused this disaster were probably launched from the territory of the temporarily occupied Crimea. And to bring it end to this war, Ukraine urgently requires long-range missiles. This we already know, but this is quite urgent because every deceased child, every injured Ukrainian demands justice, and we must seek retribution for their suffering. So yeah, I just wanted to say that and honor that the the little kids that died in this very tragic um, attack on civilians. I'm just gonna hand it off to any of you guys that want to comment on that.
Thank you, Slavi. It's good you anchor us in what's going on, because we need to keep it in mind that this is we kind of get to have some fun here, but I don't think there's as much fun in Ukraine, and certainly not when there is this kind of event that happens. So it's good to remind us, and it's a good thing if we are on the phone with one of our representatives that this is a story that can be shared with them to make it come home and realize this is personal, that genocide means little kids as well, and pregnant women, old people, young people, people of any color or race or religion. It doesn't matter. It's if they're Ukrainian, and this is what we're faced with. And I say we, but I really mean Ukraine is faced with. And I guess the we part is that we figure in later, potentially we could be at war with Russia later on, when they will at some point, cross a border too far, and then Ukraine will be uh, history by that point, and that would be a damn shame if we let that happen. And I was looking at some polling numbers today from the United States, and unfortunately, this is getting to be a more polarized political thing, and it's rather than coming together as a nation, ready to stand up for Europe as we did during World War II. We've got a house divided, and that's the house, but that's also the nation that's divided, and it's a sad place for us to be, and we really need to pull it together. I don't know how you convince the other side. They've got a leader who has, wow, been given a great deal of power by the people that follow him. And I don't know how you shake their confidence in him, because he seems like he gets doors open for him all over the place. And it's obscene with how much he gets away with. And I wish there was talking logic to the man, but there's not. So I don't know what it will be, but I think that we'll break through and be successful in getting aid. But it is important that we do it soon. This constantly pushing off deadlines again and again and again, it's dangerous and it's killing people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, James. We've talked a lot about what's happening in the Congress. And hopefully Mike Johnson will do, sorry, Moscow Mike will do the right thing. Um, you guys kind of calmed me down the last time about that. Seems like he will pass it, or he'll have to. Otherwise, he's looking at possibly stepping down. Um, so hopefully that happens. What's the time frame on that? Is that coming up this coming week?
They're talking about mid-March as a voting date. So that's a long way off as far as I'm concerned. And, yes, his speakership might be endangered. It also would cause a delay, and then that could be another record-setting event for Congress. The longest it ever took to get a new speaker could be the next delaying tactic. So it would really be better if that didn't happen. It still might be a good thing if it did in the long run, but that is the long run. We'd like a short run, please, and that would be maybe the discharge petition. Still going to take a little bit of time to arrange that. But, it seems like with Orban, approving Sweden and things like that, it's like every little thing that you can delay on, they delay on. And it's a shame, and I don't think that the people in the United States see it. Frankly, they don't see it. There's other news in front of it. So, but for every child.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Slavi. I used to race sailboats. I wasn't I wasn't especially accomplished at it, but I did learn some lessons with the water time. And one of the lessons was the each position has its own job to do, and if anyone uh, decides that they need to help somebody else at their own job isn't getting done. And so I so appreciate the work of the co-host in this space and all of the people on the speakers panel that support the co-host and all the listeners that join and and benefit from things that they can take out and share other places. What I did when I first got the very first message in my stream about Odessa was I immediately left the space and I didn't return probably for most of the night. I'm not sure I ever returned. I think I stayed. I think I stayed out where I could follow what people were saying, and what I did in response to that, I did not try to interact a great deal because I'm in one place and they're in another, and it just felt like my role there was to listen to their voices, copy and paste their messages, and send them to legislators, and send them to newspapers, and 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 spread it outside of the net as much as I could. Um, but while I was doing that, at one time, a troll latched onto one of the streams and started making really inflammatory remarks that were not comforting in any way whatsoever. And I thought, it's not for them to have to defend themselves. It's not for them to have to listen to this stuff that's just not consoling. And so uh, I sent him a comment beneath the troll's comment, and I addressed everything that he said and simply negated it with the actual facts of the matter. And it got the attention of the person who had the original post. And I didn't know that this was a good strategy to deal with trolls. because after what she had to say was being used as a tail of a kite to hang on to something, just a Russian talking point. She deleted her tweet and he disappeared. I, it was really instructive to me. This, if if a troll starts latching onto something, the, the post can be deleted. I just thought I would mention that, and I'm so grateful for the space. Love Ukraine.
Slava. Yeah, thank you. Yes. I've occasionally deleted my tweets because I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry I started that. So, yeah, and sure, it's a good idea. Thanks. Slavi, back to you.
Yeah, that's actually, it is a really good idea. um, I've kind of listened in around spaces today. Excuse me. And it seems like there's a huge push for Ukraine to make this peace deal, right? To make a deal with Russia. As we know here, it's impossible, and Ukraine should not even think about doing that. But especially after, I mean, they've accomplished so much, and Ukrainian armed forces, they showed that they truly can beat the Russian army really well. They just need the ammunition. They need ammunition, long range missiles, and the F-16s that were promised. And it's not a lot. And a lot of people that I've heard kind of speak today that push for make a deal or oppose military aid to Ukraine, um, they don't understand what's really happening on the battlefield. They don't understand what it is to be under Russian occupation, what it is that Ruski Mir is. And I think that's what we must do kind of until we get the military aid passed. But this is definitely have to push back on that and tell the truth, because honestly, in February, Russia experienced its highest average daily military losses since the onset of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So, this is according to the agency. Russian occupying forces suffered an average of 983 casualties per day, and this was throughout all of February. The British intelligence estimates that Russia has likely incurred more than 355,000 servicemen killed and wounded during the course of the war in Ukraine. This is the initial number that the Russian army invaded with, and more. So, I mean, it's just insane to even think that Ukraine would even think about making any sort of peace deal, especially how far they've come with so little that was given to Ukraine. And yeah, I think we should push for more the truth to kind of come out, because there's a lot of people that are misguided in what kind of news they're getting. I'm sorry, I forgot who had their hand up next.
That would be, I believe, Marcus, and then Anda, and then For Every Child.
Yeah, really quick. So Slavi mentioned Ruski Mir, and some people might not know what that is. It's the name of a shitty death cult that sets up in various countries, turns everything to trash, and absorbs other people's cultures while murdering. So I just wanted to let people know they weren't aware of that definition.
Or it is also, it is literally Ruski Lakmar, which is a Russian nightmare. It's the same damn thing. It's like the inflammable kind of thing. Yeah, they're terrible. Anyway, for every child, and then Anda. Wait, am I getting that right? I think I am.
It's just the opposite.
Oh, Anda, welcome. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. So, um, I actually, I come with questions, right? Uh, um, Marcus put some put the gist of what Ruski Mir means, but I wanted to ask Slavi if she has some time to tell us what it meant what it meant for Ukraine to be under Russia, to be in USSR. How did they break up and why? If what were the main reasons for which Ukraine decided to be an independent country back then in 1990 or 1991? And what were the reasons behind the change in 2014, when basically they took their own version of Lukashenko and threw it out. So that would be a drive on the memory lane. So if someone has some more questions to the topic, I'm willing to wait.
Good question. Very long-winded, but I'll try to kind of shorten it to best understand it. Under Soviet times, it was hard for Ukrainians to be. I mean, it was just super suppressed. Obviously, the language couldn't speak Ukrainian. The economics of it was a little different from what it is today, but the result is, I don't think, is any different. People had no money for food, despite of how much they worked or at what level they worked. Um, it was, I mean, basically just like slave labor, and that would be the Soviet times. Um, Ukrainians were always for freedom, always fought for freedom. So I guess that would be kind of the resolution to come out from that, from the Soviet times. And then once freedom kind of happened, Russia kind of saw it from 1991 to, I guess, 2014, let's say. Russia saw the Ukrainians are thriving and they want to be closer to the Western world, and they're good at it. And Russia didn't like that because it's this Putin's idea is that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. He even wrote his genocidal essay on this before the full-scale invasion. And Ukrainians and Russians, they're not one people. We do not stand for the Ruski Mir. We stand for freedom, for democracy, which we know the Russia is not democratic, despite whatever mirage they put up. I mean, Putin has been their dictator for